Todd Howard, the one and only, went on Wired and broke down his gaming career, offered some insights into the past and also into the future. And in this frame, you can see everything he worked on. I mean, it's crazy seeing like, you know, Redguard. I can't read. I was trying too hard to read it. Redguard. It's like it's red something. Redguard. Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout 3, Skyrim, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, and Starfield. It is interesting. Like 3 on the 360. One, I don't think Redguard even launched on console. That was probably PC only. So yeah, it's cool saying like this is his whole career basically, or all these games. But like his whole career, he's done this. Isn't that crazy to think of? Like it's just crazy. So let's see what he has to say. I'm gonna get Todd out of the closet too.
I am Todd Howard here at Bethesda Game Studios. You might know me from games like Skyrim, the Fallout series, and now Starfield, and I'm here to talk to Wired about some of the games that we've made. What people don't know about this game is one of the
I realized me saying just casually, I'm gonna get Todd out of the closet sounded weird. Probably seemed like an odd thing to do. Always with us, watching over us. This is not weird at all.
the first full 3D shooters where you look at controls today with mouse look controls and using WSAD. This is the first PC game to ever do it. I had just started at Bethesda. This is in the mid-90s. Team sizes were small. We're talking like 10 people, 12 people, tops. Everybody had to do a lot of different things. So I did a bit of programming. I was producing. I did level design. I became the sound effects guy. What's fun with this is the old manual that came with the game. And there's a sketch in the back. There's a lot of cool artwork here. And one of our concept artists did a sketch of the core team here, positioned as if we were the cool. Resistance in the Terminator world. And there's me in the back, and I remember David Plunkett here, the artist who drew it, just said, Todd, I gave you the biggest gun.
That's super cool.
Whenever you're on a team, even if it's 4 people or 400 people, learning how to use everybody's skills and work together is, you know, what gets you the best game. So, you know, a couple of these games, starting with Terminator, is the beginnings for me at Bethesda. And there's a couple of different phases and chapters in terms of the games we made, the platforms that we're on, and how everybody worked together.
It's crazy to think that like AAA games used to be made by like 7 people in a year, you know? It's crazy.
Daggerfall is a game where so much of it is a giant procedural world where we're relying on the computer to generate all of the content and put the individual things that we had built kind of in smart places around the world. Think about 3D today. That work is being done by GPUs. Here, it's all done on the CPU. How we built the world is we have a height map where you get a bunch of vertices at a certain period, and then you're building a height map for the landscape, and then instancing, building 3D objects that get replicated over and over on that height map. And believe it or not, it's how we build games today. It also pushes, for us as we do role-playing games, what kind of character that you're gonna create. So Daggerfall's character system really is this jump up in terms of defining yourself. What are the advantages of your character? What are the disadvantages of your character?
I want to know where he got that box. That's crazy, dude. It's like foiled and everything. It's wild. It's wild. And like, to give Todd credit with all this, I know like we meme on him. Yes, I have a cardboard cutout of him. Like we joke about, you know, Todd's sweet little lies and stuff. The dude is a legend, okay? Like we joke about it. He is a legend in the industry. He is a master commander, okay? Like we can poke fun. He is responsible for some of the biggest games in history. He's the brains behind the operation of a lot of like Western RPGs and a lot of the craze behind open world adventure games. If you like open world adventure games, a lot of that is because of Todd Howard's work. Like, again, we meme on him and we joke about it. He is actually, no joke, a very huge part of gaming as an art form today.
And brings in for the first time the Elder Scrolls skill system that so many people know now from games like Skyrim. And this game had a lot of success, really brought the Elder Scrolls to a new audience. Redguard is the first game that I was the main project leader on. Didn't do that well. It's the last kind of DOS-based PC game that we made. It might be one of the last DOS games. It's right when 3D acceleration starts coming out. Really didn't hit a technology window or a gameplay style. It's listed as an adventure game, but it's a true genre mashup. It has some adventure game elements. It has action game elements. It has some role-playing elements. I guess you could say at that time, we started making a lot of games instead of focusing, and none of them turned out really, really great. And the company was in a really difficult position financially, and I did feel responsible, and I kind of stepped back from it and said, it's a really good game. Where did it not resonate? What's the takeaway? And it was just too conservative. We made a very, very small game. I think it's well crafted, but we weren't as ambitious as we could have been, and not what our audience we'd had at the time from Daggerfall and Arena really wanted from us when it came to the Elder Scrolls.
It is interesting, like, hearing some of these lessons learned early in his career and seeing how it affected the games that would come for a decade, 2 decades after. Like, I think one of Todd's perhaps greatest strengths is also one of his weaknesses, which is that he always pushes perhaps too far. Like, he's very concerned with being ambitious and wanting to do things bigger and badder. But often for Todd, the problem is just that their technology that they're using can't keep up. Like, the creation engine just can't keep up with the vision for Starfield. I think Starfield built in a different engine that was more capable of greater fluidity, shall we say. I think Starfield is a much better game if you can manage that, but I think Todd's ambition sometimes is overshadowed by the technical limitations, which, I mean, is true for every developer, but
the companies...
It had too few planets. The planets, it had too many planets that were not interesting enough. Like, I think Starfield would have been much better served if it weren't as ambitious in the counts and the numbers. Like, if it went for just 5 planets in the solar system for you to go explore, and those had all the procedural stuff, but you can explore the whole planet in a seamless way, like, that would have been awesome. But again, he just wanted the 1,000 planets number because it sounded really good.
Struggling. We probably have one more shot if we're going to stay in business. So let's go all in. The company was kind of sold to ZeniMax Media, a new company, and reformed around that. The decision came down, we're going to have one team. It's going to be under Todd, and we're going to do Morrowind. We aimed very high. We were very, very ambitious to bring back the Elder Scrolls with a core team that we had, but taking the learnings from a game like Redguard, where we are hand building a world, but now we're doing it on a larger scale compared to the games people know today. It's actually still very, very small, but it's very, very detailed. And the other big thing that comes with Morrowind, we finally took it to console. So if we go back to the year 2000, Microsoft is thinking about creating the Xbox. And technically...
Oh my God, look at that. They did him so dirty. Look at that freeze frame. Oh man, and the big chonky controller. Oh dude, and they didn't even clean off the plexiglass. Look how dirty the plexiglass is. Man, these presentations used to be so freaking clunky. It was so funny. But I mean, it is weird now that we live in an age where we have all these gaming consoles and gaming is so mainstream. You know, it's like a Renaissance painting. You know, like now it's just par for the course. Like, it's not that shocking. It's pretty much expected that we have all these gaming consoles, but there was a time where there were not like these kingpins of the gaming industry. Like, the Xbox comes along and is like, yeah, we're taking on the PlayStation, we're taking on Nintendo. It was kind of crazy to see that happen. And then PlayStation starts investing even more money. And then console gaming pretty much becomes Xbox and Sony. head to head, and then like Nintendo's off in the corner doing their own thing. But you know, this is all a pretty novel concept, especially when you compare like gaming as an industry is, you know, however many billions upon billions of dollars every year. And films and movies and stuff, you know, are also however many billions of years or billions of dollars a year. But gaming is so much newer. It's so much younger than that industry, than even film. And so who knows what it's going to look like in 20, 30, 40 years as it continues to evolve. But all of this is still very fresh. It's crazy. It
was great for us, right? It's a very PC-styled console, has a hard drive, so many things that we would be looking for in a console. And the big question was, how do we, you know, translate the controls and all of those things? Fortunately, we are all here today because this game was a huge success. I was stunned. Obviously, it did well on the PC, but on Xbox at the time, it became the second best-selling game behind Halo.
It is wild how one game can change, or one thing really. It's true even in my industry of like YouTube. If you have one video that just explodes, that can kickstart an entire career. You just need one big success for things to change.
Instead of coming out with a quick sequel to Morrowind, why don't we take 4 years and really go ambitious again for the next console with hardware that doesn't exist. Team size now is getting up to around 60, 70 people. And this is a game where the core group from Morrowind was still here. We could build on that and be ambitious. We changed the technology hugely again, getting into pixel shaders, we're having to guess on
a program that renders lighting, shading, and color effects on each frame on a per pixel basis versus normal maps. So normal maps are very flat, lacking any sort of dynamic color or lighting, whereas pixel maps way different. And I'd say, I mean, it's a huge visual upgrade for sure. For 4 years, this is night and day.
Hardware. So whenever you're doing technology in your own side of massive amounts of content and art and design, and then you have a moving hardware target, it's the most difficult game development or any type of exercise that you could do as it comes to tech. There was a moment we were making the game with Xbox where that console didn't have as much memory as we wanted. And when they finally called us and told us that they were doubling the memory on the console they were shipping, we threw a party here. And I have never seen programmers look so happy in my entire life. This was a game that, for many reasons, it vaulted us to an audience we had never expected to see on the PC and the Xbox. Comes out later on PlayStation. And it really starts this other era of games for us, the 360 era.
Yeah, it's always amazed me that these developers will start creating a game before they even know what the hardware is going to be like that runs it. Like, we're all talking about, you know, GTA 6 right now because obviously GTA 6 is very, I mean, we're just probably a week or two away from seeing it. And that's a game that they started back when the PS4 was still, you know, the active console. And so they're developing it with the expectation that in the future we'll have much faster stuff. And I'm sure they have calls with like Sony. If Rockstar calls and is like, hey, PlayStation, hey, Xbox, what's the thing that's going on? Like, what should we be focusing on? Like, are we getting a way faster SSD? Are we getting this or that? What are we thinking of in terms of ballpark of rendering capabilities? And they get like ballpark ideas, but they don't get dev kits till much, much later. So I would assume they get a little bit of info and they hear rumblings and stuff, but in general, like more broadly, they're probably just kind of guesstimating on what they actually have to work with. And so they have to build it in a way where it can scale back or even scale up a little bit. And perhaps that's why we see some more conservative games come out that are very, you know, just treading water right around the time these games launch. Or consoles launch, rather.
We were asked, what else does the team want to do? What do you want to do, Todd? It'd be good to have more than one franchise or one game every 4 to 5 years. At the top of our list was Fallout. It was a series that we had loved that had come out a while ago, and we were able to get the license. This game comes out, I believe, about 2.5 years only after Oblivion. Uses a very similar technology base that we have built. It's our second game on the Xbox 360. One of the things that happens with games is knowing your tools, knowing the level of technology, and getting your whole team used to working with that pays big dividends. It's also really special because we're picking up a franchise that we hadn't worked in before. It's very new for us, it's very exciting, but how is it gonna resonate when we translate basically somebody else's work the way we would do it or the style of game that we enjoyed best? And this game was even more popular than Oblivion. Some of that audience came with us, and it also found an all-new audience because yes, there's post-apocalyptic things in movies and literature and games obviously, but really there's nothing like Fallout. It's the world before the bombs fall. This world where the view of the nuclear future is this utopia that then gets destroyed. And it also has my favorite beginning of a game. This idea that when you leave the vault, you had spent your whole life there.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I didn't know this was his favorite intro because I have some strong feelings.
Of a game. This idea that when you leave the vault, you had spent your whole life there, and how do you make the player feel that way? So us jumping through this montage of these periods of your life, I think it's on your first birthday in the game, when you're a baby and you're able to walk around, you press the button and the baby says, Dada. That's actually my son on his first birthday that I recorded saying that back to me. So very special game for me.
Well, that is super sweet, super cool. My frustration, Astro Grizzly, my frustration with the opening of Fallout 3 is that, for one, subsequent run-throughs, absolutely, it's a trudge. But that's not my biggest problem. My biggest problem with Fallout 3 is that the whole game is structured around you following your dad, who's doing all the cool stuff, and then you're the secondary character with the whole thing. It's so different for BGS games, because normally BGS, especially Skyrim is the best example. It is just, you're the superhero, you're the god among men, you're able to do whatever you want, you're amazing, you're stunning, brave and beautiful. And with Fallout 3, it's just the total opposite. It's yeah, your dad's doing all this amazing stuff, Liam Neeson's amazing, you just go try to figure out where he is. That's kind of the whole game. That's the whole game. It's really, really weird. And they did sort of a reversal in Fallout 4 where now you're the father looking for your son, and your son's now doing all the cool stuff, and you're the father and you're just following him along. It's just the opposite flipped back. And honestly, I don't think I like either. I just don't think they work too well. I think Skyrim does it great when it's a big sandbox, because Bethesda at its core, I don't think they make RPGs. I don't think I would call any of these RPGs. I would call them sandbox adventure games. Yeah, there's action RPG elements. There's little stuff here and there, but more broadly, they're adventure games and they're sandbox games. They're designed for you to do kind of whatever you want. You run around, you just have fun. You just dick around. They're junk food sandbox games. And when they try to be RPGs, intense RPGs, they fail. And it just falls flat. It's why with Fallout 4, everybody's don't mess with the main story. Just go do the side stuff. The side stuff's where it excels. And I would agree. Same with Fallout 3. The side stuff is where the game is at its best. When you try to do the main story, it starts to get really weak and shaky. So I think Bethesda's at its best when they understand what they do well. But when they have these moments where they're yeah, and we're going to do a really intense story this time, you get a Fallout 4 and it just kind of ends up being a jumbled mess.
And that sits right with Oblivion. Well, I think the one we're best known for is Skyrim. Now the team has grown. Now we're about 100 people. And you're looking at a team that grew from Morrowind to Oblivion to Fallout 3 and then to Skyrim. We were really firing on all cylinders in Skyrim, and it shows. We also started pushing the modding community. Modding is when you modify a game. You take it, you change something. People want to create their own adventures or artwork or anything. Our games allow it. We're huge fans of it. It's kind of how I started back on the Apple II, changing other games. It's still a complicated role-playing game, but the number of people who had never played a game like ours, or some people not even any video game, they came to Skyrim. So that right there.
I mean, Skyrim to this day is still just it really is incredible. Like, I've gone back and tried to be like, do the stereotypical YouTuber thing. Was it ever that good? Was it just marketing hype? And I really do think Skyrim is that good. I don't think anybody's delusional or thinking of it with rose-tinted glasses. Like, I really do think Skyrim is that good, but it's because like it encapsulates what Bethesda does really, really well. And it doesn't try to do anything too much beyond that. It's just Bethesda in their prime doing what they do best. Not trying to push too much, not trying to do the hardcore RPG, not trying to do any sort of crazy base building or space sim stuff. Like, they're just doing what they need to do, and they're so good at it. And then we get into like the most recent era of BGS games where I think they start to flounder a little bit.
There is kind of that 360 era for us with our role-playing games where they find an audience that we never ever expected to find, a level of popularity, and us here learning how to make these games. The team's about 110 or so after Skyrim, and we set our sights on the next Fallout.
Game of the Year achievement unlocked. Who's Game of the Year? What are you talking about? What are you talking about, Todd? Come off it. Okay. I know they, of course, didn't win Game of the Year at the Game Awards. That went to The Witcher 3. I'm like 99% sure. So, like, they didn't get it there. But I'm sure some magazine gave them Game of the Year so they can say it. Yeah, it's Todd's Game of the Year.
Skyrim is the first creation engine game where we had redone a lot of the technology that then feeds into Fallout 4. New scripting system, how we're handling all of the NPCs and the AI, the era of Xbox One, right? Where the technology level jumps up again. And we had a very, very dynamic world with this game. If you look back in Morrowind, we have NPCs that feel believable for that era, but they're pretty much standing around. They're signposts. As we go into Oblivion, we push that. The NPCs could wander around. They had day-night schedules. They went to bed. You could poison them by stealing all the food and then just putting poison apples around. They would decide to eat that. Fallout 4, it does feel like a good action game in your hands, but it has those RPG systems. Everything can be used for crafting or used in some respect. So everything you pick up has these base components. Build your own settlements, modify your guns, modify your power armor.
And again, these systems are really, really cool. But this is where I think sometimes Todd's ambition can get away from him, because like this stuff was cool, but in the context of the main story, it didn't make any damn sense at all. Your son's been kidnapped and is missing, and your wife murdered in front of you. And instead of chasing them down to try and get help, it's like, I'm going to dick around and turn these glass bottles into a wall, and I'm going to build myself a little shed. And then you say, oh, Luke, you're supposed to do that after you finish the main story. Well, I would say not really, because they have multiple quests in the main story where they ask you to engage with the base building stuff, like to get into the Institute, or one of the first things you do with the Minutemen and those guys. So I thought tonally it just didn't really fit that well, which is why if they didn't do the main story the way they did, and if it was more like, instead of your son being kidnapped, if it was more just like, you know, your wife got killed because they were going to try to take her, but then, you know, she got shot or died or something, then at least you could be like, oh, he decided to just move on. His wife is dead. He's not going to chase the guy down and try to get revenge. He's just going to move on and engage with these other systems. Then I think it would work. But the particular story that they chose to start with just makes it so if you take the story seriously, you aren't going to engage with any of the other stuff that they have. You know, put up on the table.
Minute to minute, I think Fallout 4 is a huge success for us for just how a game feels in your hands.
And I would agree. I mean, I think playing Fallout 4 like an adventure game and ignoring the main story, you can have an amazing time with it. It's very, very good. But I think if you try to play it like an RPG, if you try to play it the way that they kind of present it to you initially, you're going to have a bad time.
So we have Fallout 4, and then really an offshoot of Fallout 4 that is multiplayer.
Oh, I want to hear what he's saying. What's he going to say about this?
Every
Xbox exclusive 500 atoms, baby. Oh, man, what a deal.
Every game we do, everyone...
Yeah, achievement, the only achievement going online. That's all I can say about that.
Everyone asks us to do multiplayer. We usually decide, obviously, not to. With Fallout 4, we had gotten inspired by these online survival games a lot of us were playing. We said, well, If we ever did multiplayer for Fallout, that's how we would do it. Borrows a lot of systems from Fallout 4. It's the first game really where we do that, where you can see things from the previous game almost directly in it. It's a brand new type of game, and I think as people know, we struggled. And despite its issues, we had a lot of success.
A wasted wasteland. Is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke? A beautifully crafted but ultimately repetitive world, a pointless walk in the post-apocalypse. Ooh!
Successes. We built our own online platform from scratch. Sold really well. We had a core audience playing the game despite its problems who were telling us, we love this. Please fix it. We joined with our community in having that communication about what would make the game better, how do we go about it, and us here learning how to get in a cadence and continue to update a game, put our heads down, do the hard work. And today, 5 years later, it is one of our most played games. Now a very big success for us, both in terms of what it's doing for players, but also it made us much, much better developers going through a difficult process.
It's a very good way of phrasing that. How I would phrase it is that they charged full price for a game that was an unmitigated technical disaster, and they intentionally hid the game state from players. And then beyond that, every aspect of the game and its marketing campaign, secondary merchandising, everything was a disaster. Again, just go watch the Internet Historian video if you need a breakdown of the whole situation. It's crazy how many pieces of that were just a disaster. And like, to their credit, it seems to have mostly been a project that was mandated by executives within ZeniMax because they were trying to boost revenue numbers before being acquired by Xbox. So it makes sense why it exists the way it does, but that doesn't excuse it or make it any less scummy that they went along with it. And, maybe their hands were tied. Todd had no choice at all. But until he says that himself, we're just speculating. Like, I understand he obviously doesn't want to badmouth his bosses or former bosses, but still, either way, it's scummy.
This is an all-new experience. The most ambitious game that we've made, and the scale of it dwarfs everything that we had done so far. For a long time, we wanted to do a space game, something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and something new outside of Fallout and Elder Scrolls, an IP that hasn't existed. So we did our first new IP in almost 30 years. We started development right after Fallout 4. We knew we were going to redo the bulk of our technology. It borrows so much of what we've done in previous games, from the procedural generation in games like Daggerfall. We redid the base engine. That's the whole game loop. When people talk
Creation Engine 2, baby. Creation Engine 2. Oh, man.
Engine, they're talking about what is the inner core loop of the game and how all parts talk, not just the renderer. Most people see engine, they think graphics renderer. That's just one part. So we redid the graphics renderer. We had a whole bunch of new AI, new animation system. We have a different system just for crowds, new system for visual effects. And so much of it was new. This project obviously took us a while, and a number of things also happened during this time. We're jumping up in hardware into the Series X and S on Xbox. The pandemic happens, obviously affected everybody in the world, and we became fully part of Xbox as part of them now with this game. Each of them on their own create a challenge. All of those things together made this one a challenge, but one that was really, really thrilling for all of us here. And if you see the original pitch of Starfield, go back 10 years ago, the tone, the way the game feels really, really sticks to it.
I mean, I think Starfield, especially in the coming years, is going to be looked on as a game that was too ambitious and that was held back a lot by its technology. Like, I'm so glad to see people kind of snapping out of the coma of hype and starting to see it. There's even people within the Xbox and BGS fanboy community that are saying, like, No, it has a lot of problems. And they were saying at launch, this is one of the greatest games ever made, game of the generation, blah, blah, blah. And they've totally walked that back and are settling on it now. And I think that's good. If you want Bethesda to do their best work, you have to be honest with them. You can't do this crap where you're hyping them up when clearly the game has problems. Starfield has a lot of strengths, but it has a lot of weaknesses too. And I think they all are just born out of a couple of early decisions and priorities that didn't line up with what was probably best for the end experience. Like the embracing of so many load screens for every single room, every building, everything. Like, it's crazy that in the age of the Series X, S, and PlayStation 5 to have a game like that from a major AAA developer, it's just crazy. So I hope that they're taking this feedback and adjusting to it and learning from it. Because I mean, imagine if in 4, 5, 6 years we get the Elder Scrolls 6 and it also has these Starfield levels of load screens. Man, people are going to lose their minds.
Look what I made here. After Redguard, the company changes and now we're part of ZeniMax. We almost had to like reset ourselves and who we were coming into Morrowind, and then we build off that. These share a very similar technology base in the same way these share a technology base, and now this does. If we meet again, there'll be an Elder Scrolls 6 here. You're talking to me, but there's 450 people here. And we still have people that work on 76 and a team there and doing updates for these games. We have about 250 on Starfield. These only exist because of all of those people and us working together. That's why the games are so big. That's why there's so many moving parts and so many interesting things that people will find, is that comes from everybody here and all of them putting something special of themselves into it. Seeing it visually, even though they're obviously digital, the boxes make it tangible. These are these things. They have kind of their own personalities. And I'm going back and picturing the faces of the people here that I've made them with. There have been so many people that have been on the journey with us here, and can't wait to continue it together.
Yeah. And I mean, I know there's been rumors of Todd Howard retiring soon. There was one guy who was posting stuff to Reddit, and it's like, I have an inside source. Somebody I know knows Todd Howard, and he's saying that he's going to retire because he's really disappointed with the reception of Starfield, blah, blah, blah. It ended up being just like totally made up, and, everybody made fun of him until he deleted his stuff. But it was, I think he eventually retires, maybe like in 20, 30 years, but I'm guessing he's going to be one of those like Miyamoto types who's just always there and is always at least a presence. So I don't think he's going anywhere. As for like how Bethesda continues to evolve and change, I think they just need to take a couple of basic steps towards modernizing. They do have some impressive tech that's powering games like Starfield, but there's also a lot of shortcomings with it. And in the modern day, there are just frankly certain things players have come to expect that were perhaps not even that knowable before the PS5 was announced. Like, I don't think that people at the top of this generation expected 60 FPS to be seen as the minimum requirement. Like, nowadays, if a game is announced and it's 30 FPS only, people lose their freaking minds. But if you rewind the clocks to like 2020, I think it was like, yeah, a performance mode at 60 is nice, but 30 is fine. To 30 is very acceptable. So I think it's understandable why certain priority shifts happened, but moving forward, I think they absolutely need to prioritize modernizing their tool sets, modernizing how their games actually run and operate, because Starfield felt really outdated and continues to feel outdated now, and it's only going to be more obvious how outdated the tech is if they don't make major improvements by the Elder Scrolls 6. My only hope is that the fans can be as clear with Todd as possible, such that he understands it and that it needs to be a priority, and before we get the Elder Scrolls 6, they make the necessary upgrades, because again, in 5-6 years, by the time we get that game, nothing is going to be sitting with load screens between going from outside in the world to inside a building. Like, now it's rare. At the end of the last gen, it was uncommon to see it still in big open world games. Like, whether you look at Red Dead or any of the Assassin's Creed titles or anything like that. But it still occasionally happened. But by 2026 to 2028, whenever we get Elder Scrolls 6, basically nothing is going to have that. And if Bethesda's still doing it, it's going to be a really bad look.
He took my thing.